Hello, welcome to our 10th session of our online, let's call them sessions. I don't like the term classes, that sounds like I'm trying to teach you stuff. And as I've said on many occasions, you can't learn martial arts from videos. You can learn techniques, you can learn posturing, you can learn pretty dance moves. You cannot learn how to make them work, and you cannot really learn how to use them effectively without at least training partners, and preferably somebody who knows what they're doing, mostly because they will probably have insurance, and that is very important when we come to actually sparring and things. Make sure you are covered by insurance. Anyway, we are here back in my lovely back garden again. It is very warm and very sunny, hence the very unfashionable baseball cap, but it allows me to actually see, which is an important part of any martial art. If you can't see something, you can't hit it, unless you're doing some weird blind fighting thing, which is beyond the likes of me anyway. So, what are we going to be looking at this session? Okay, so for the next hour, what I want to look through is some alternates to punching. Okay, when you look at most martial arts, a predominant amount of stuff is to do with punching, and it all comes back to this Western boxing, very traditional idea of what we see as boxing. There are alternatives out there, okay? And we're not talking like Vulcan nerve pinches or judo chop and this kind of... There are some really good techniques out there that use either the open hand, use the elbows, or use the knees. So we're going to have a look at them kind of over the next hour. So the first thing I want you to do, this you can do with me, is let's have a look at the fist. And this is why I want to explain why it's important to do open hand stuff. That's right, I should probably fall in before I go any further. See, I'm glad that I have at least several multiple personalities talking in the back of my head at all times. So we shall fall in because one of them just reminded me. So attention and fall in. Good, right. So as I said, let's start having a look at open hand techniques, and we're going to start that by looking at a closed hand. Okay, if you just take your hand and form a fist as you would do. Okay, most people will be able to form a fist quite happily. Hopefully your thumb is on the outside. If you put it on the inside, you're going to dislocate your thumb. So that is your fist. Okay, what I want you to do is just put your fist against your flat hand and push your fist towards your hand, and you'll probably find there is some give in these knuckles here. Sort of in the knuckles here, in the bones here, there's a bit of give, okay? Now, any amount of give you've got is energy that is being taken up by your hand and not going into your opponent. Okay? So most people, when they're forming a fist, are actually forming something that is less effective than their open hand. Okay? Because if, for example, we take the same thing and you push against the bony bit of the bottom of your hand here, this is kind of the area you're going to be striking with, you will probably get no give whatsoever. Okay? So by making a fist, unless you're doing it properly, you're actually making your attack less effective. Okay? Now, if you want to make it properly, and this I will teach you just because we've done pugilism things, rather than forming a fist as most people do, they will close their hand around, wrap their thumb around like that, okay? And what you'll find, if I take the top of my hand here, I can quite happily wiggle my finger until it kind of disappears in here and it looks like I'm doing a magic trick. Okay? That's no good. What we need to do is curl from the very tips of our fingers and roll it up. I always think of this, if you imagine tomato puree, that's what I always think of. When you squeeze it out and you get most of it out and you start rolling the tube up to try and squeeze the last bit out. Okay, a toothpaste works as well, depending on how old-fashioned your toothpaste is. But that's what I'm looking for. You can curl the fingers round and wrap it in really tight. Okay, and you'll end up with a bit here, and there is no way I can get my finger into there. There's also none of that give in my knuckles anymore because everything is solid. Now this actually takes effort to maintain my hand like this. The minute I stop tensing those muscles, it goes back to how it was before. So I have to get used to, if I'm going to be doing my fists, is having those wrapped up really tight and getting used to putting that constant amount of pressure on my hands so that when I hit, all of the force from my movement is going through my hand. if you want an easier tactic, learn your open hands. Okay? Your open hands are already, as they are, they're already solid. As long as you don't do anything stupid, whatever you're hitting with, all of that force is automatically going to be transferred. So that's one of the things we're going to be looking at with open hands. Okay? Now, a lot of our open hand stuff comes from Chasson, which is a predecessor to Savate. We talk about Savate really being our kickboxing component of our syllabus. We mostly take the kicks from it, which is why all our kicks have really badly pronounced French names, especially when I'm teaching. But these are some of the hand techniques that come from it as well. We don't automatically transfer a lot of these over to Bartitsu, but they're there and they're very useful to know. So we're going to be looking at these. They were designed to be used by sailors, partly because there's less chance of damaging your hands if you're actually using these techniques, okay? Because of that energy transfer, you're less likely to connect with something that's going to cause automatic damage to your fingers. Mostly because you're going to be striking with the hand rather than the fingers, okay? So it keeps your hands actually much safer than they would do if you were hitting unarmed as if it was pugilism. It also keeps your hands open. So if, for example, in these guys were on a boat and a wave comes up, you've got hands open to grab onto a rope, bit of rigging, another sailor, whatever else. It gives you the option that your hands are open and therefore you can grab stuff, whether that is an improvised weapon, whether that's something to balance yourself, or whatever. The other thing is, open hands look a lot less aggressive on CCTV or in the eyes of most untrained people. If you slap somebody about, that looks a lot less aggressive and a lot less violent than if you start punching somebody in the head. Now, in truth, you can do as much damage and be just as nasty with your open hands, but it looks better to most people. Okay, I'm going to be talking about the law a little bit later on in my rambly section, but just to give you an idea, there's some of the reasons that I think it's worth having those open hand techniques in our syllabus. So anyway, I've got Troy out so that I can actually slap him around a bit. I can't hit him too hard or he falls off his perch, but hopefully you'll at least be able to see what it is we're actually looking at. So, because we're dealing from Savate, Chasson background, all of these come with lovely French names that I'm useless at remembering. So the first one we're going to look is the, I think it's how's it pronounced? The Massut. I'm not great with these. The Massut is essentially your stereotypical open hand attack. I'm going to throw my hand forward and strike with this kind of area here. There's a bony bit, kind of literally where your forearm goes up. I want to try and hit almost with the center of my forearm, about here. So that when I throw that attack out, my fingers are curled back out of the way and I'm striking with that area there. Or from the backhand, it can come through as well. Okay, now there's two types of Massut, or at least the way I think about them. We have to start with the horizontal Massut, which is from our guard position, we're going to just throw that hand straight out. It goes on a straight horizontal line. Those are our Massuts. And we're going to use that same kind of twisting power that we'd use if we were boxing to generate the force. So from here, that's my Massut. It's okay if you twist your hand a little bit, depending on your opponent. It's really easy on a dummy. But if I was attacking a real opponent, I may turn my hand over to try and strike at different areas. So it doesn't really matter how your hand is orientated. It's just important you don't catch your fingers. So, what is the purpose of the Massut? There are several. One, it's just a standard strike, okay? And I can land this solar plexus, throat, kind of your either side at your carotids. Nose is a primary target, okay? These are all things that I can just throw out, bang, straight bit of damage, bit of stopping power. The other thing this does is lines me up for a lot of other things because it pushes my opponent away. So if my opponent is prone to rushing in, I can keep them at bay and they're now an arm's length, and that means I know exactly where they are to come in with some other kind of counterattack. You can also give me options for hitting and then grabbing and then pulling my opponent into something else, okay, which is we're going to kind of look at a little bit more later on, but it gives you those options. Okay, you've got those kind of quick fired out, boom, hit. They're not strong hits, okay. Realistically, nose is about the only place that's going to do you any serious damage, but it's really good for just stopping somebody who's good at charging in or getting a grab on somebody. Now the other type of massute, and this one I think is probably more effective, is what I call the vertical massute. So rather than it going straight out, this one is going to come from a lower position and it's going to come up. So from here, it's going to come up at my opponent. I can do it with either hand. And the idea of this one is to land that same target area directly under the chin. Boom. Boom. The idea being most people have their teeth slightly apart. When you hit that in, it just kind of slams the teeth together, the head goes back, everything gets rattled. Okay, and if your opponent is a bit, whoa, whatever, they're more susceptible to something more dangerous coming in afterwards. So from here, I can either drop down at the front and bring that up through my opponent, or from the back, okay. The other advantage of this one is if your hands are relatively low or out very much passively, trying to keep distance but not being aggressive at somebody, I don't want to be in this fight, that kind of posturing, that can rise from there very quickly if there's an opening. Okay, and that rattling of the head again can give you a chance to get in there, gain control of the situation, land in another blow, okay? So your massutes, your distancing massute for your horizontal, or your teeth rattler coming up through that way. So those are your two basic slappy techniques that I kind of like. Okay, moving on from the massutes, we'll have a look at le BAF, which I love partly because we happen to be called BAF. It's not quite the same spelling, but it's certainly the same sound. For those people who haven't picked up on it, yes, I named the entire group so that we would have an anagram that sounds like it comes from a 60s Batman episode. I wish that wasn't the reasoning now, 10 years on or whatever, but that is the reasoning. Anyway, the BAF is the clout. It is the big, solid, slappy technique, okay? So this is where we're really going to hit our opponent. So, you can do it from the front hand, and it becomes almost a clip round the ear. Rather than, really these kind of huge hooks are no good. Much like if you were throwing a haymaker, the other person's going to hit you before you land that blow. So instead, we're going to throw that out just slightly shy of the body, and then twist the hip to get that snap across. So we get to there, and then we twist the hip to slap it across. Okay? Now that, a clip round the ear, is only really useful as a distraction. But what it can be good for is opening up other attacks. Okay? So we can start with a into the ear. If I can hit the ear, I'm halfway to that single-handed grab that I'm looking for if I want to move into the clinching that I think we looked at last week, week before, something like that. Okay? The other thing it allows me to do is if they back off, that movement there will clear their guard out of the way, which leaves them open to something like the massute coming through afterwards with their guard no longer in place. The great thing is I can plan to do either. I can throw the attack, and if it hits the head, I grab. If it doesn't hit, and they've stepped back, then I use it to clear. Yeah? And then come through with the massute or something, you know, or Western boxing or whatever. But it gives me those options. So that's really the reason that I would use that front massute. Sorry, not massute, the front le BAF there. Now, le BAF from the backhand is a step forward slap. Okay? If I've against Troy here. Okay, again I'm hitting with that same region of the hand, and now I'm hitting that side of the head. And this time I can put a full swing into it, because I'm not going to do this unless my target's already open. Okay, this could be that I've already hit him with something, yeah, he's already slightly distracted, and then I'm going to step in with my big clout. Okay? It's nothing exciting, it's literally just a big haymaker technique. We're going to use that step pass forward of the feet and that drop, much like we talked about lots of times with that drop step, and either straight across kind of horizontally or more at a 45-degree angle that is going into the side of the other person's head. And the idea is not so much to cause them vast amounts of damage, but disorientate them. Okay, a lot of these techniques are about moving your opponent around, lining them up for something else, okay? But don't get me wrong, a good solid slap across the face, if it hits behind the chin, you can dislocate the jaw. If it hits on the side and the temple, you can get instant knockouts the same way you can do with pugilism. The other great thing is if you cup your hand slightly instead, put your thumb in at the side and form a nice little cup, and you are lucky enough to land that, rather than going for the main attack, you land that over their ear, that will burst an eardrum. Just the pressure build up will just pop the eardrum. And if that happens, it's incredibly painful, and you know, you can then just throw somebody around, tie them up, whatever. It's a kind of a extreme tactic because it can cause permanent damage and all the rest of it, but in a life or death situation, getting that popping eardrum and then piling in is an option, okay? Normally I would keep my hand open specifically to avoid any accidental chance of that, and again strike with that part of my hand into the side of the head. So that's Le BAF, quick little clip around the ear, or a big honking wallop across the side of the head. Either of those will work. You also get Le Reverse de BAF, which is essentially the backhand pimp slap. So from here, it's a backhanded attack. So I'm hitting this time with the back of my hand. And again. Okay. This tends not to be something you'd go for as an initial attack. Okay, partly because normally your hands would be here. You kind of need to move it across your body before you can attack with it. But it's a lovely follow-up, okay? If anybody study any other martial arts and you've used a back fist, we're going to talk about some of these later on, you can use your reverse de BAF at the same time. So if a punch is coming in and I palm it down, from there I can just open that hand back out, smack across the face, okay? Again, we're not talking major damage, but we're talking a sudden reversal, a quick whipping attack that's going to cause pain and distraction and allow me to get in with something better. So if I palm a fist down, backhand, I can then come in with something like my Masu to do some more damage. So from here, okay? There was actually the Apaches, which is a street gang operating in France. I said after Bartitsu kind of broke down, some of the guys went across to France. That eventually developed into what we now think of as Defense dans la Rue, which is really, a lot of that's about dealing with the Apaches. But one of their favourite techniques was to have their hands in their pockets when they were talking to somebody so they didn't look aggressive, and then from there that hand would come up into that reverse BAF. Reverse to the BAF there, bam. Once you've hit them there, they would headbutt the other person in the stomach, grab their feet and dump them unceremoniously, grab their knees, lift and dump them unceremoniously on the background in front of them, and then stomp on them. So that was one headbutt, grab, hoik. Not an elegant technique, but it clearly worked because it was one of their kind of characteristic techniques. So that's the reverse de la BAF. I like it, especially you can use it a lot if you've kind of missed something else as well. One of those other ones didn't hit. My hand's now across here. Do I reset and go for something else? Might as well take it back through that and back to guard again before I move. So it's that extra little action you can throw in. I'm aware my time is escaping me today. That's not good. Okay, the next one I was going to look at is Le Tranche, which is your chop. Okay, now when we're hitting with the chop, yeah, and this comes really straight out of your jiu-jitsu manual, Tamiwaza open hand striking stuff. We're trying to hit with the kind of wrist and little finger bone there, bam. This is taught in a lot of self-defense things because it's really natural, choppy action to make, and you can hit kind of quite a lot of targets with it. You know, I can hit the neck, I can get in there, I can kind of, from an angle, I can get the chest, I can get the biceps, again, just causing pain. I can get the bridge of the nose, anything I can get, and literally it's just a falling action of throwing the hip round, like you would with a hook or something. You're throwing that technique in. Okay? So the tranche works, it's a nice simple one, and you can kind of throw it in wherever you want to. So, you know, you can quite happily look at things like you can, you know, if I remember now, your massut, get them at distance. Once they're at distance, you can step in, deliver that chop to the side of the neck. You're going to do a reasonable amount of damage. All of this still keeping your hands open. The last two we're going to talk about are slightly different. All of these ones we've looked at are very much just strikes. The last two are nasty. These are dirty street fighting techniques that I would not advise you using most of the time. And these are the pique. And the first one we're going to look at is the pique fouette. So the pique is a technique which is essentially eye gouging. Okay? So it comes in two forms. One of them is the fouette, in which case, if you think of like fouetti, it's a round sweeping kick. The fouette is a quick whipping action. So what I'm actually going to do is, from my guard, is whip my hand very quickly out and back again. Okay? And the idea being that one of my fingers will slap into the opponent's open eye. Now, your eye is quite a small target, okay? There's some jiu-jitsu stuff where you're trying to strike in with like some kind of kung fu snake hand. The accuracy required to get that is really difficult. If you spread your hand like that, I have 4 chances of one of those finding your eye. Okay? So it comes out and those are open, and you kind of whip it out and back again. So it's a very quick attempt just to hit the eye and cause watering, bit of bloodshot in the eye, bit of pain, so you can then get in with something else, okay? So from here, and then you'd be in with something else. That one's not too bad. The second version of Le Pique is Le Pique Press, which is a much, Le Pique Presse rather, is a much more nasty technique. Okay, and in this case, rather than a quick flick here, what I'm actually going to do is grab my opponent's head, my thumbs find their eyes, and I push in forward. Okay, so I'm going to grab the head, those thumbs go into the eye sockets, and I push. Now I don't push my thumbs forward, I push my whole arms forward and everything. So, and I will lean and I will put all of the pressure in until I have done enough damage that their eyes are no longer functional. Again, it's probably a permanent change. Okay? This is a last resort. The other guy is trying to knife you or strangling you out and you have no other options. Grab the head, dig the eyes in. Le Pique Presse, really nasty technique. But I could go for my set, grab with one hand, grab with the other hand, find the eye sockets, and then my Pique Presse in to really make them a very unhappy person. So all of those techniques work. Sorry, I've changed the camera angle, so I have to go here now to see what time's left. But all of these are empty hand techniques. None of these we closed into a fist. They all come from that same body of Chasson. So there you go. There's a few hand techniques for you to play around with. And they can fit quite happily in with your Western boxing. So there's nothing to stop you doing a massut and coming in with a punch. There's nothing to stop you using those kind of ranging a jab out, find your range, and then step in with your BAF. There's nothing to stop you doing. Actually, I'll come to that later. There's one of the techniques we use for an elbow strike that leads very nicely into the reverse BAF coming across there as well. There's nothing to stop you using that kind of peek, flick with the fingers, cause a bit of distraction, and then come in with a good solid cross. That was actually a pass with a straight, but what I meant was, you know, I can flick and then come in with a good solid cross to finish the fight. So those are your open-handed techniques. Okay, so I did say one of the things I was going to talk about, and this will be my little ramble today, is how self-defense works within the law. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is because it's come up in about 3 separate conversations with different people this week. And everybody you ask has a different view on how the law works. Okay? For the law here, I'm talking about the UK. Okay? I don't know what the laws are in every part of the world. I can only talk about UK law here. But the way it's set out in UK law seems very sensible to me, and the approach we take to it, I would say, would work in most civilized situations. Okay? Now, UK law says that you are allowed to use necessary force for about 5 different reasons. Let's see if I can try and remember them. You can use them for self-defense. You can use it for defending somebody else. You can use it for defending property. You can use it to prevent a crime, and you can use it when performing an arrest. Okay, we're not going to go into citizen's arrest. That is way too complicated for today. But essentially, it is saying there are situations where using force is legally allowed. Okay? But what the real crux of it all comes down to is it says you can use reasonable force. Okay? And what is reasonable force? Ultimately, reasonable force is if you are in a fight and you use force and it goes to court, the onus is on the opposition to prove that you acted with excessive force. And who do you have to convince? You have to convince the jury. Okay? There is no hard and fast rules on what is considered reasonable or excessive. Okay? The onus is on the prosecutor to prove that you have done it, that you have used excessive force, and it's the jury's decision at the end of the day. So, you have to operate within that idea that if you ever use martial arts to defend yourself, you might have to then defend that later in a court of law. So what does reasonable actually mean? Well, reasonable means you don't apply more force than is necessary to resolve the situation. Okay? If somebody tries to punch you in the head and you respond with a throat strike that causes them permanent neck damage, you used excessive force to that situation. Okay? If somebody tried to knife you and you broke their arm, you'd probably be okay. Okay, the threat was bigger, therefore the amount of force you could use escalated with that. Okay? However, if you're fighting, somebody tries to stab you with a knife and you take the knife off them, their level of threat is de-escalated and your response has to de-escalate in return. So if you took the knife off somebody and then broke their arm, that would be excessive. Okay? Now, it's all very subjective, but there are some things that are worth knowing. You don't have to wait for the first punch to be thrown. If you believe you are under threat and you believe a preemptive strike is the most effective way to deal with the situation, you are totally allowed to do that. 2, I've heard weird ideas that you have to declare you have done some martial arts training before you're allowed to use it in a street fight. None of that. If you don't have to declare anything, there's no legal difference between somebody who's trained and somebody who hasn't. You end up in the same court with the same situation. You do not have to declare anything. You just use whatever training you know. A few other situations that we're thinking. If somebody hits the ground and you stand on them, that is pretty much a definite giveaway that you were going beyond what was needed to solve the situation. So that's one to look out for. If you are armed with whatever kind of self-defensive weapon you want to try and justify to yourself, if you are armed, you were at least in some way preparing to go into a forceful situation, and therefore you were already geared up for using extra force. Okay? So if you're carrying any form of weapon, whether it's one of these little keychain things, stabby things, or you happen to carry a baseball bat in your bag just in case, those all hurt your legal case at the end of the day because you were prepared for it. The other thing, if you had the chance to run away and didn't take it, that is also considered a huge negative. It implies that you had the chance to get away and you decided to take it to force. Therefore, you used more force than was needed, and therefore you are guilty. Okay, that's a lot of jumbled up rules and stuff. And if you really want to know, there are hundreds of websites written on this. One of the best, and I will not say this often, is actually the UK government website. Does spell it out relatively well, but there's lots out there if you want to go and do your reading. What we need to be able to do is come to a sensible approach of how we actually advise people to react in a self-defense situation. And this is really what I'm going to end this section with. Okay, step one, if you can walk away, walk away. Okay? Not every self-defense situation has to end in a fight. If somebody's mugging you for your wallet, give them your wallet and walk away. There's no reason to take that to a fight, unless you happen to have your life savings in your wallet or something that's irreplaceable. But most of the time, it's money, credit cards you're going to cancel, whatever. Okay? If you can walk away, do so. Okay? It doesn't matter if you lose reputation, the other guy calls you a coward. None of that matters. You can walk away. Okay? Step two, if you cannot walk away, use as much force as needed to run away. Okay? If for some reason you can't just walk away from it, the guy's actually coming at you, throw a table in the way and peg it. Okay? You're then going to use enough force to get away. Okay? Maybe you're going to sweep a leg, let him fall over and run. Anything that gives you enough time to make your escape. Okay? That's step two. If step two doesn't work, you use enough force to nullify your opponent. Okay? Or nullify the threat. Okay? That means if somebody in a drunken barrel is taking a swing at you, you grab them and probably put them in a hold and sit them down somewhere, and they'll probably sort themselves out. Okay? If it's somebody who's actually trying to do you serious damage, you might have to go a bit further. You might have to actually injure them. But you're applying as much force as is needed to stop the threat. And the minute the threat has stopped, you stop. If you keep going after the threat's nullified, you're then breaking the law. Okay? So step one, walk away. Step two, use enough force to run away. Step three, use enough force to nullify the threat. Okay? Step four, stop. Okay? That is your basic guide to staying within the law as best as you can. Okay? Right, well that all got very heavy-handed, so I think we should move on before I kind of just bring everybody down and go, why am I doing martial arts? I will ever need to use it, then I will just end up in prison. Even if that is the case, it can be better than the alternatives of letting somebody actually lay into you. But anyway, if you know martial arts, you can defend yourself. It's just understanding where you come. You need to keep yourself safe. You need to keep your family safe. You need to keep your property safe. But you also need to not actively be trying to inflict harm on others. Right, okay, let's move on. So, the second half of what I want to look at today, I'm disappearing off screen so I check the timing, is I want to look at elbows and knees, okay? Because a lot of the time this is normally seen as kind of Muay Thai guys doing giant jumps and smashing each other in the top of the heads. I'm trying to remember his name now. There's a wonderful set of movies with a guy who just basically elbows everybody in the top of the head. I do like my martial arts movies, so. Also, kind of a lot of knees, these big kind of knee strikes coming in. We're going to have a look at some of those, but we're going to have a look at the ones that we use in terms of Bartitsu rather than some of the more outlandish ones that are out there. Okay? So the first one we're going to look at is again what I would call a horizontal elbow, and this is probably your main strike that you will be used to. So from here, rather than attacking with the fist, I'm almost going to do a hook. You know, it's almost that old-fashioned hook style, but what I want to do is just bring the elbow directly across. Now the problem I have with this, if I throw a hook, I can reach kind of out here. If I throw an elbow, I can only reach out here. These are only techniques that are going to work when I'm very close to my opponent. Yeah, I can quite happily hook my opponent here. My elbow's still a foot short. I need to be in here to actually deliver that kind of strike. So you need to understand your ranges. This is grappling range combat. Okay? Now I might be able to step in to do that. Yeah? But I'm still delivering the strike at that grappling range. But the horizontal one, you can do it with the front arm, but it tends to be rather ineffective. It works better with a build-up from the back leg. And you can get a good solid hit into the side of the head or the side of the neck with that as you come round. So that is your horizontal kind of sideways elbow. The other one that we use is the vertical elbow. Okay? So this time, what I want to do is, rather than bringing the elbow across, I want to bring that elbow up. So it becomes almost like an uppercut. If he's not leaning forward, I can't hit him with an uppercut. That's the problem. And I can do this from the backhand as well, through here. So when I'm doing this, my hand is coming up to my ear, and I'm sliding that up. One of the nice things is, once I've finished, I'm also guarding the side of my head to anything that might be coming in. Okay, and this is again going to aim for under the chin, possibly nose, but ideally under the chin. This is that same kind of jaw rattling technique from earlier. So there's nothing to stop you. Quick slapping the chin up, coming into the side with that step. Okay, and if you like being in really close to somebody, these give you some nice big powerful hits. Okay, so that's your vertical and your horizontal elbows. Not ones I like, but in fairness, I'm short and stubby. Okay, my reach is not that great. I do not want to sacrifice half of it. Some of you taller guys who are like 6.5 feet tall and built mostly out of beanpole, yeah, you don't have a problem with this. Your job is putting more mass and more weight behind things. This is the kind of technique that's going to work for you. Yay. Getting a yay from Michael, given that he is a lot taller than me and probably weighs about the same, but is a lot taller. Yeah. So yeah, he wants to be putting more of his mass behind his hits. So these are kind of good techniques for people who have a bit more of a kind of longer limbs. One technique that I like, because I'm a bit shorter, is what I call the set elbow. And this I think comes more from my weaponry training than anything else. But essentially, if I'm ever using elbows, I will find that my fist almost ends up touching my solar plexus a lot of the time after I've kind of done these attacks. So what I quite like to do occasionally is set my hand, look like almost like a kung fu bell there, into my solar plexus with my hand here. So I'm actually bracing it against at an angle, and my back foot goes straight. So continuity of line, if anything pressing on that elbow is coming down through my leg and into the ground through that hold. Okay? It's essentially setting spears and letting the other guy charge onto you. If you've got a guy who likes to come in with a big wild hook, drop under it, drive that up, and let him run his chest or his face onto your elbow. Okay, you are going to throw it forward, but it's more about bracing it and holding it there and letting them charge onto you. So it can work quite well if I come in with an elbow and then I'm thrusting forward. If I, for some reason they step back out of range and then are coming back in, because a lot of people will dodge back and forward. Well, they dodge back, fine, they're coming forward. Follow that through with that set elbow coming out there. So there's your third technique. Across, upwards, set elbow. What else are we going to look at? Sorry, I'm a bit less organised than I normally am. Today's just been a long day, so I'm a little less prepared than I would be normally. So, where are we going after that? After set elbow. Oh, yeah, this is something I haven't come across in a lot of other martial arts. Probably the most common way that we would use an elbow in Bartitsu is what we call limb destruction. Okay? Now, a lot of the time when somebody tries to hit us, we don't just want to stop them, we want to hurt them to make them think about doing it twice, okay? And we talked about this when we're looking at the basic parry, coming up and twisting round, using this bone along here to dig into our opponent's hitting against our opponent as we block, okay? It can make the hand go numb, it causes pain. If we can make them think twice before they throw out their punches, you know, that's a bonus to us. Now, a continuation of this is where we start using our elbows. And one of the common ones in is if a punch is coming at you, is to drag your elbow across your body. Now, ideally, what I'm looking for here is my elbow to make connection with the fist coming in. And this is really difficult to demonstrate. But if you can imagine that fist is coming in, I want to drive the elbow across to actually smash into that hand and through it. So I'm actually delivering this essentially as an elbow strike at the incoming fist. Okay? But what you will notice is I don't do this just as an elbow strike. I drop my hand down. Now what that means, if I miss with my elbow strike, anything from here to here coming in will get swept across and I don't get hit by it. If I come in here and I miss it, if it's going below or above, it gets through. Here, you've now got to come above here or below here to actually get that same punch in. So it just increases my angle of block, because ultimately this is a block. If I can do the damage, that's great, but the attack is a secondary part of it. Now, of course, the other great thing is once I've gone across here, I'm set up perfectly for my reverse BAF that we were talking about earlier. So I can block across, slap in the face, finish off with the cross. Okay? Nice little combo that you can use there. But ideally, if that fist is coming in and the elbow is going to come straight into the side of the hand, you can break fingers with it. Okay? That one is relatively easy to make work. There is another one that is better but harder to make work. So this time, how am I going to do? If the punch is coming in, I'm going to try and catch the punch as it's coming in and raise it, my elbow through it. So I'm pushing down with my hand and up with my elbow. Okay? So the punch is coming in, I'm going to catch it with my hand, almost as if I was palming it down. But as I palm it down, my elbow comes up. So I catch the hand, move it into place and drive the elbow through the hand. So that rising elbow there, delivered from the back, will take the hand and come up the elbow again, coming through the bottom of the hand. And again, you're trying to break the hand and incapacitate their ability to keep fighting. Okay? So those are two versions of limb destruction, which is actually just destroying somebody's hand. If you can take their hand out of the fight, they can't keep going. So, version 1, we swing across, reverse BAF. Option 2, we palm down and drive the elbow through it. Okay? But all of these are still elbow strikes, just maybe the last two are a bit more Bartitsu in their application. Okay? And in their kind of sneakiness, as it were, or odd way of working. Okay? Moving on from there, we've also got the knees. Now the knees are a long way from our opponent most of the time. If I was going to be able to kick him quite happily here, but my knee is still a long way short. And these kind of weird jumping knees, I'm not a fan of them. A bit like jumping kicks and a lot of other things. The minute I have both feet off the floor, I am committed to a direction of travel that I may not want to still be on. So I will always try and keep one foot on the floor, even if I'm doing like a lunge or something. I still have the option to abort and go sideways. Yeah? Abort, go sideways. If I'm committed and I'm in the air, I'm here before I get a chance to move. So I don't tend to advise those, but they are a thing that exists. So if I want to be striking again, I've got to be in grappling range to make that actually any good. Okay? So really, we have 3 knee techniques that I think are worth looking at. The first of them, I'm going to call the frontal gnu, which again is just my bad French pronunciation for the front knee. Okay, so from here, I'm going to drive, once I've got in close to my opponent, we're in that kind of grappling situation we've talked about. From here, that knee is going to come up into the chest. Yeah? Or I can take it from the back. If I've got a little more room and want a little more power, I can come from the back. So either way, I'm grabbing my opponent and pulling them down onto it and going up into the stomach, or indeed up into the face. Okay? Oh. Sorry, just try and reset Troy. So from there, dragging them down into it or through. Okay? Really simple techniques to make work, but you've got to get away from the idea of throwing them as a kick. You're literally just moving the knee in a straight line from where you want it to be to where the attack is. And you pull your hands down towards it. Okay? There's not a lot of complicated. The much harder part of that is getting hold of the person's head. Okay? But we've talked about that in closing and grappling other times. The second one that we're going to look at... Oh, why is that one put me out of breath? That's weird. Is the fouetti gnu. So this is your turning kick, your turning knee, okay? So from here, I'm going to move across like this. Now, I'm never really going to deliver this as an attack. If I'm here, I could, I suppose, use that as an alternate, but that is that straightforward one we've just looked at is a much more effective attack than going in sideways. The time I'm going to use this is against somebody doing a fouetti at me. So when we've looked at a fouetti, okay, when we looked at kicking, a lot of them go straight forward and we said we can move those out the way. But the fouetti comes round here. I can't block that with my hand, okay? I need a different way of dealing with it. So one option is the kick is coming in, I move back out of range and let the kick go past. The other option is to step forward into the kick. So as the kick comes in, I raise my knee. And this is where it's going round. So what happens there is the kick comes round and the opponent's knee comes in here. So I end up, again, I'm not delivering the attack. I'm putting the knee there, depending on which side it's coming, and letting them deliver that full power kick and driving their own inner thigh onto my kneecap. So rather than running away, I'm going to step in, take the power out of that kick because now I'm closer, there's less velocity in it and it's hitting my knee, hurt them and get a grab and I'm into my grappling. Okay? It's quite situational, but if you come across someone who loves those big sweeping roundhouse kicks, dodge the first couple and then get in there. Change the rules on them. Okay? So that's a second knee technique I would use. The third one is almost impossible to actually do on a dummy, and this is what I would call the gnu presse, or the pressing knee. So from my guard position, if I got in against my opponent so their knee is near mine, I will use my knee to turn out. So that what happens is their knee goes that way. Okay? So I'm getting my knee inside theirs here and pushing it across. And it just takes the stance away. So if they're in the middle of fighting and then suddenly, okay, that gives me a chance to get in, move the knee out the way, and deliver a punch. You know, whatever else you want to do. I'm trying to remember now, my mate, my BAF, whatever I want to throw in there, just a straight cross. But I'm getting my knee in and twisting it suddenly to the outside, just so the other person temporarily loses their stance. Okay, hard to demonstrate. But those are the techniques that I would tend to use. So you would have your elbows, occasionally useful. I like them for blocking. There's also some techniques we use where the hand comes up to block, covering the whole head and leaving the elbow forward. So the idea is you're trying to let them punch onto your elbow. It requires a bit of training, a bit of tactics to actually get people to hit the elbow, but it's a potential way of blocking. And if you've certainly seen, there are some more modern styles that actually this is their standard stance, as it were, to protect the head and use those elbows to defend. So sometimes we'll raise the elbow for the defense there. So I like defensive elbows. Knees I like to use when I'm in a clinch. When we've got in and we're grappling, that's when knees really come into their own, okay? Or at least that is my interpretation of how I fit them into BAF. There will be people out there who train knees and elbows all the time and will tell me about the wonders and joys that it can bring. That's fine. It's not something I'm familiar with. It's not something I've ever seen in Bartitsu. Knees, again, even if you look at things like Muay Thai and things, they tend to use the knees once they're in a clinch. Okay, that's where most of that comes in. So, there you have some elbow and knee techniques to work on as well. So, we have covered today open hand techniques of several different varieties, and we've also looked at some elbow strikes and some knee strikes. Now I can see a lot of text going up past me on the screen. Do we actually have some questions, or?
Not specifically on what you're doing now.
No, that's fine. Okay, I'll just pick them up later. And it was just in case there was anything relevant, I would pick up on those now. So, yeah, so as I said, what we have is alternatives to striking. So what that gives you is a style where you can be much more passive looking. Don't want to fight, I'm not interested in fighting, it's okay, I'm just going to go. I'm going to be over here, it's fine. It's all very de-escalating body language. Yeah, as opposed to, I don't want to fight. Yeah, it doesn't look realistic. This, palms open. But from here, I still have access to all of my techniques that I might want to rely on, whether they are knees, elbows, or open hands. So it gives us a whole different variety of ways to fight that are probably much more effective when we come to something like a self-defense or a street fighting situation than our more stylistic pugilism. Yeah, it has its place, but it looks very aggressive. People are familiar with it being very aggressive. Much harder to hide what it is you're actually doing. So, those are some of the reasons that I reckon the open hand techniques of BAF, I love them as well, just because you can knock people around with them. And if you're controlling where they are and where their balance is, you can then move into clinches and into throws and all of that kind of stuff that, to me, that's what self-defense is. If you can tie the other guy up and put him on the ground without scratching him, that's when you're doing self-defense right. Okay? That's not to say you don't want to occasionally just welly in there and have the fun of going into a full-on boxing match with somebody, getting pounded around the head whilst you're trying to pound them. It teaches you a different set of skills. Okay? It teaches you about taking a hit. It teaches you a lot more about angles and all the rest of it. But I would say those were training tools that give you all of the skills, all of the timing that you need to employ more self-defense situations, more self-defense techniques that are less aggressive and more controlling if you ever needed to. So, I think that's kind of where I'm going to leave things today. Hopefully you found that interesting and you found some of those techniques, either things you didn't know. If you're wanting to know more about some of these techniques, certainly the open hand stuff, check out the stuff I linked a couple of weeks ago from Tommy on there. I know I use some of them a little differently to the way he does, but the techniques are the same. So always go and look at what somebody else has to say on the same subject. Next week, and really next month, I'm going to be moving away from the core Bartitsu stuff, and I'm going to spend a little while looking at improvised weaponry. Partly because several people have asked me to cover improvised weaponry, so it makes sense to do that. And also because it actually makes up a useful part of this self-defense part of the syllabus. So I'll be explaining a little bit about what we have in terms of archetypal weapons and taking a few weeks to take you through each of those and how we apply teaching improvised weapons, which sounds like an oxymoron, but it should hopefully make sense next week. So next week I'm going to be looking a little bit at some alternate ways to use the cane, just to kind of ease you into it. We've already looked at the cane in terms of Vigne, but as you will notice, Vigne cane has the cane up here the whole time. This is useless if you need that cane because otherwise you fall over and you've got a dodgy leg. Okay, my leg's doing great at the minute because I don't have to move around as much because we're in lockdown. But normally I need a walking stick to get around. I can't be doing this for hours on end or my leg just gives up on me. So what alternatives are there? Okay, so we're going to start off, we're going to have a little bit of a look at a style of cane fighting called Cunningham.
That's great, because one of the things that I've been talking about in the text here is about balance and
Yeah,
when you need a stick rather than just...
absolutely. So we'll be looking at Cunningham next week, which is a style much more delivered for when you're leaning on it and the cane only leaves the floor temporarily and then comes back again. So if you can stand for a couple of seconds unaided, you can use Cunningham. So we're going to be looking at that. We're also going to be looking a little bit at shillelagh and giving you a bit of an introduction to some of the shillelagh techniques that we employ as well. And if I have time, how we kind of bring all of these together into cane. I'm going to use that as a starting point, and then the rest of the month, as I said, we're going to be looking at more improvised weapon stuff. So hopefully that encourages you to keep coming back for the next 4 episodes and finding out a bit more about improvised weaponry. And by the end of that, we should hopefully start having an idea of how lockdown's going to play out in terms of closing, and I'll be able to give you our kind of syllabus up till the end of that. But hopefully you've enjoyed this. If you have any questions, drop them down in the forum on the chat here. I will reply to them there. Message me, whatever. Always happy to talk to people. If you have ideas, stuff you disagree with me, stuff you think I've missed or whatever, let me know as well. I'm always looking to develop and grow as well. So if you know something that I've missed, tell me. And then I can go and read about it. You can tell me about it, and I can get better at all of this as well. But other than that, I will see you next week. So we shall fall out. So, attention stance and fall out. So, thank you very much. Have a good week, okay? Whatever you happen to be doing, I'm trying to ignore very much that in about 5 minutes I probably shouldn't be outside because people are going to start booing. But moving away from the political stuff, have a good week. I'll see you back here in a week's time. And until then, keep yourself safe and above all, be kind. Okay.